Inner Behavior, a conversation about changing our negative thoughts and feelings. I'm Jared Van, a BCBA board certified behavior analyst. That's the degree for that, or that's not the degree, it's certification right there for that. Um, and then I'm also a Master of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis. That fell, of course. I don't know if that's, a sign to come or whatever. And then I also got my BA in psychology. Uh, if you want to access my slides, feel free to use this QR code. You could also go to my website, jaredvan.com, and click Inner Behavior PowerPoint, and you'll be able to access these slides. And while people are still maybe scanning or trying to access those slides, I'll just talk a little bit about myself. I'm currently a PhD candidate in special education, not student. Student means you haven't passed candidacy, at least at my university. Candidate means you have passed candidacy. And some people don't know that because they're not in a PhD program. I didn't know that before I was in a PhD program either. Worked as a behavior therapist for over a decade. It was called a behavior therapist when I started. Now it's called behavior technician or registered behavior technician, behavior interventionist. Those are some of the words. Um, I worked with students with and without disabilities in the California Bay Area and Greater Los Angeles area. Once again, I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And I said a Master's of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis. And I'm a graduate of the Morningside Academy Summer Institute. Highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in some of the things we talk about today. Now, this is the agenda that I have set up for us. We're going to go over a quick history, a little bit of what we almost kind of just touched on earlier. Then we're going to go into what is private behavior, what is inner behavior research, what inner behavior research has been done, how do you measure and change the frequency or the counter number of your inner behavior per day. We're going to do an actual interbehavior or inner behavior timing. So please grab a pen and pencil and paper so that we can actually engage with it. You can practice and you can learn. And then we're gonna talk about what are the benefits of inner behavior interventions and what research still needs to be done in inner behavior. Then we'll move on to questions and discussion. Sound good?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, perfect. Well, we got to start with a little quick history about Wilhelm Wundt and Western psychology and introspection origins. So early Western psychology, so let's make sure we understand we're talking about Western psychology because there has been studies and research in psychology in other places that's not necessarily recognized by Eurocentric standards. Um, and it was formally emerged with Wilhelm Wundt's lab in the late 1800s, and he pioneered introspection, the systematic observation and reporting of one's own conscious experience. And his goal was to study the structure of consciousness through trained observers describing mental events. Abby, did you learn a little bit or a lot about him back in your days?
Yes, it actually I haven't heard that name in a really long time, but now that you're talking about it, it does ring a bell.
Yeah, yeah. We all have to learn about him when you're in those intro Psych 101 classes. But there were some people that had problems with introspection. They reported that the reports varied dramatically between observers. They lacked replicability, the cornerstone of science, and introspection was ultimately criticized for its inconsistency, subjectivity, and lack of observable behavior. And the people who really criticized it for those things were people who became behaviorists, specifically John B. Watson. In response to introspection's failings, John B. Watson rejected private events as objects of study. He founded methodological behaviorism, insisting that psychology should focus only on observable behavior. Watson believed that introspection had no place in scientific psychology. He thought mental states, lols, he thought mental states are private entities which, given the necessary publicity of science, do not form proper objects of empirical studies. So to him, private events like thoughts and emotions were not considered valid subjects for scientific study because they cannot be observed by others. So his camp is called methodological behaviorism. Now, then later, B.F. Skinner developed radical behaviorism, reintroducing private events into behavior science. Skinner asserted that private events, such as thoughts and feelings, are behaviors governed by the same environmental principles as overt actions. and still analysis lacked tools for rigorously studying private events. So, in applied behavior analysis today, many BCBAs will say that they're radical behaviorists like Skinner, but they're really closeted methodological behaviorists because they're like, oh no, we can't study private events. We can't blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, well, you're saying you're a radical behaviorist, but you're acting like a methodological behaviorist. Also, I like to ask methodological behaviorists, I'm like, do you have a spouse, a husband, wife? Oh, yeah, yeah. Do you love him? So, you can't love. That's a feeling. It's a thought. Nope, you can't love them. So, I kind of like to poke the bear a little bit every now and then. So, have you ever come across like this part with BCBAs,
Yeah,
like the
and
thoughts and feelings?
yeah, and sometimes we don't really have these deep conversations, especially when we're like collaborating on a case. A lot of the
Mhm.
work that we do is focus on the intervention work and kind of identifying, them as the expert in their field, and me kind of doing more of like the mental health aspect of it. But it's interesting because I think that the more that you say it, like the more we're aware of it, right? Like of how people present and how people take their work. And I'd like to think that most of the times, especially with like traditional psychological methods and interventions, it's usually somewhere in the middle where the things are the best. Not necessarily at either extent, like either end of
Spectrum.
the spectrum, right? Yeah, like having a mix of both can be very beneficial, I think, in a lot of cases, especially when each person's so unique. Like every person that we work with, right? Like they don't always
Hmm.
adhere to certain ways. So, yeah, this is fascinating.
Exactly. Thank you. And I think that one of the things that we as behavior analysts, I call myself a behavior scientist, but as behavior analysts can do something we can do better is play in the sandbox with other people we work with physical therapists, occupational therapists,
Hmm.
speech language pathologists, mental health professionals such as yourself. I think we could do a better job at playing in the sandbox with y'all because the truth is, we're all working to improve the quality of life and abilities of the person we're working with. And we should be collaborating, working together. And sometimes, from what I've heard, a lot is that there's not friendly collaboration, and then there's sometimes combative back and forths. So hopefully we can work on that.
Yeah.
And it, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just agreeing, and I think that you being here is a
Yeah.
part of that too, right? Just us modeling it for others.
Exactly, exactly. And in the chat, if you identify with either methodological behaviorism or radical behaviorism, we'd love to know. Hey, if you're methodological behaviorism, I think that's okay. Okay? Um, I don't know what you think. But private events, let's talk about what their definitions are. Private events refer to internal stimuli or responses that are not directly observable to others. B.F. Skinner introduced the concept to refer to stimuli generated within one's own body that can be observed directly by the individual, as well as covert or concealed responses that occur internally without overt behavioral manifestations. So these look like a few different things. So let's go over some examples of what they look like. There's interoceptive stimuli like hunger pains, muscle tension, or a headache. These internal bodily sensations can only be directly felt by the individual experiencing them. Kid might say, I have a toothache. I can't see it, but they're experiencing that, and that might influence their behavior or their overt behavior, observable behavior. Then you have proprioceptive stimuli, like sensations of limb position and movement. Others can't directly detect these stimuli as well. If you got your hand up for a long period of time and you're tired of having your hand up, nobody else can really tell, but you can tell. Covert verbal behavior, like silently talking to oneself or mentally working through a math problem, these cognitive responses occur internally without overt physical articulation. Covert emotional responses, like feeling angry but not displaying angry behaviors outwardly. The emotion is expressed privately within the individual. That's maybe when you have some people showing it, I guess, is the resting bitch face, but you may just be fine. I'm sorry if I curse. I didn't
No,
know if
you're
you were
good.
cursing. Okay. And then mental imagery that occurs silently within the individual's mind, invisible to an outside observer. This is like if I say, close your eyes, think of an apple. Now I can ask you, what color is the apple? Is it
Mm,
colorless? Is it just an outline? What does the apple look like to you? That's the mental imagery.
mhm,
And then unobservable physiological responses like changes in heart rate, blood pressure, or neural activity. And tools may detect these, but others cannot directly observe them.
mm,
So those are some examples of private events. And people really don't think, especially behavior analysts, don't think that Skinner really talked a lot about private events. But if you actually read Skinner, he talked a lot about it. These are some quotes, but I'm going to focus on a few. In Brown, one of the things he said is there is no reason why methods of thinking and the teaching of thinking cannot be analyzed and made more effective. Then he also said, then in this book, I have to call it out. This is the White Book. Every behavior analyst, well, just about every BCBA knows what this book is. We call this our Bible because almost everyone has to read it, go through it, learn about it, and then before you take the BCBA exam,
mm,
you got to know what's in it. So this is our Bible. If you look in your applied behavior analysis book, it says Skinner's behaviorism makes three major assumptions regarding the nature of private events. A, private events such as thoughts and feelings are behavior. B, behavior that takes place within the skin is distinguished from other public behavior only by its inaccessibility. And C, private behavior is influenced by a function of the same kind of variables
mm,
as publicly accessible behavior.
mhm.
Essentially, private behavior should be subject to the same laws and
Yep.
principles as overt behavior,
Mhm.
and there's no reason why it shouldn't.
Right.
So those laws and principles that we often talk about are reinforcement, punishment, extinction.
Mhm.
Um, and Ogden Lindsley, the founder of precision teaching, created this really cool table to show just how much Skinner talked about inner behavior or private behavior. He assigned 15 to 50% of his writings to inner behavior, which he called private events. So this guy was really thinking about private behavior. So, mm, inner behavior is really a subset of private events. It's a part of private events. It's under private events. It refers to thoughts, feelings, and urges that occur privately within the individual.
Mm,
And it's private events are a broader term encompassing all events that are not directly observable by others. Inner behavior is considered that subset specific category. And
mhm,
there's been a debate within psychology about the role and significance of inner behavior or private events, especially within the radical behaviorism camps.
mm,
However, many behaviorists and researchers acknowledge the existence of inner behavior as valid private events. So, methods have been developed to study inner behavior, such as self-reporting, tracking frequencies of thoughts and feelings,
mhm,
and examining the relationship between inner and outer behavior.
mhm.
And I'm just setting this all up so that we can all kind of get to where we gotta go, because there's
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of objections to this, because this is not something that a lot of people that are behavior analysts have seen. They're gonna say, "Oh, well, there's a lack of observable, measurable data. There, what about subjectivity and interpretation? And what about the reliance on self-report?" Well, I've got responses to those too. If you
Mm,
open up your white book once again and you turn to page 105, you look at that green highlighted area, it says, however, research on private events does not necessarily involve direct measurement. Does not necessarily involve indirect measurement. A research participant who has been trained to observe his own private events is measuring the
mm,
behavior of interest directly.
mm,
Radical behaviorism does not insist upon truth by agreement and can therefore consider events taking place in the private world within the skin. It does not call these events unobservable and it does not dismiss them as subjective. So we understand that private events are valid and inner behavior research is a valid way to measure
mhm,
what kind of thoughts, feelings, and urges are going on in our body.
mhm. And
So, no, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna ask because we talk about like at least in like therapy world we talk about like the somatic experience, right? The mind body connection. We talk about
Hmm.
similar to BCBAs. We talk about how your environment impacts you. So like kind of in your example of like the tooth hurting, that could have been caused by a lot of things in your environment, right? Whether people are aware of it or not, right? Like maybe you bit something really hard and you broke your tooth. So,
Exactly.
so are you saying that there are some people that feel like that maybe that's not a valid It's not measurable because it's not something that you can concretely say, like you can see that this thing is hurting.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's this thing called inner observer agreement in applied behavior analysis, and I'll get to it. And it's where you have to have two people, or two or more people,
Okay.
observe whether or not something is occurring, and they both measure it, and then you both detect whether or not you're measuring the same rate, so
That
that you
makes
can say,
sense.
"Oh yeah, two people saw it at the same time, saw the same thing, so we
Yeah.
agree it both happened."
Key witness.
But yeah, yeah, but I mean, we already know about witness testimony. We already know that, like, say if I took a substance and all of a sudden saw that there were aliens in the sky and somebody else was like, bro's tripping. I mean, and somebody else took the same substance and they were like, "Oh yeah, I see the aliens too." I mean, that doesn't
Right.
mean much, you know what I mean? So I get on my whole inner behavior IOA's BS thing later. But another thing is, um, in behavior analysis, especially in radical behaviorism, we understand that we all have two environments at all times. We have the environment that everybody can see, smell, touch, taste, feel, that everybody's aware of, that everybody exists in. Then we also have our own internal environment. I'm the only one that can feel my pangs, my hunger pangs, my pain. I'm the only one that can feel that. So that's the second environment that only I can investigate. So with these two environments, those shape or dictate the kinds of behaviors that we're likely to emit.
Right.
So at least that's the way that we understand it. Make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, now I have a salacious story that was actually published, and I still to this day can't believe this man published. Like I said, this book right here, this book, I gotta bring it up because behavior analysts know it. The first author is Cooper. Everybody knows Cooper. Old dude, great guy. But he published this article on inner behavior, and we're gonna just use this to kind of understand what an inner behavior intervention looks like and why it might be used. So let's get into it. Cooper's inner behavior. So Cooper was experiencing frequent negative and destructive thoughts about his wife, children, mother-in-law, which he felt were threatening his marriage. Few things. These are thoughts and feelings that were unwanted. So he's feeling, and he goes into detail. He says he has non-wife thoughts about sexual behavior with other women. He does not like his mother-in-law, and he didn't like chaperoning his children to and from different places, like baseball games or what have you. So these were destructive thoughts that he felt were harming and threatening his marriage and his family life. So he decided to use an inner behavior intervention to self-manage these destructive inner thoughts and replace them with more positive and loving ones. So for 1 month, he simply counted and charted his destructive and loving thoughts daily, but saw no improvement. So off to the right is the standard acceleration chart. I'm gonna blow it up in a minute to make it bigger, but for now, what he's doing is he's counting over here. We'll see that these X's are destructive thoughts and the dots are loving thoughts. On the standard acceleration chart, X's are behaviors we want to decelerate or decrease. Dots are behaviors we want to increase or accelerate. So for 1 month, he simply counted and charted his destructive and loving thoughts daily, but he saw no improvement. He then began a daily intervention of counting all the loving thoughts he could generate about his family within 1 minute. Things such as, like, he might use like a count clicker like this. And it's like, for 1 minute, he's like, "I love my wife. I love my children. I like taking them places. I really enjoy their presence. They make me happy, blah, blah, blah." He does that for a minute, right? Immediately after starting the think count intervention, the positives went up and the negatives or the undesirable thoughts and feelings, the destructive thoughts and feelings, decreased and went down substantially. And he discontinued the intervention after 9 sessions, but continued to track the thoughts. At a 4 month follow up, loving thoughts remained high and destructive thoughts remained low, indicating the intervention led to durable improvement. So here's the chart blown up a little bit. We can see the X's, especially in the beginning, were higher than the dots. Oftentimes, what we've recognized in precision teaching, this is a precision teaching intervention, when these X's of negative thoughts are higher than the positive thoughts, that's when we kind of notice the stress. Maybe they're at the same level or higher or high level, we notice there's distress. So he's counting all day. And even not the first time, he has all these negative thoughts and these few positive thoughts. So as soon as he introduced that 1 minute counting, the X was over here before and the dot was down here. Now the dot's up here and the X is way down at zero. So there was an immediate effect once the intervention was introduced. And the QR code is to a video I have of me talking about this. So before I go further, Abby,
Yeah.
what do you think about
I'm surprised it worked.
this?
Well, the self-reporting is really interesting. That's a secondary thing, but I mean, I think it's also something that we utilize in therapy a lot. We do talk about like in CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral
Mhm,
therapy. We analyze our negative thought patterns and we're trying to address how to reduce them. And one of the things that you do is you try to interject those negative thought cycles with a positive thought, right? Or replacing them with a
mhm.
positive thought. So um, it's so interesting to see it laid out like this because I don't think a lot of times in therapy we have the opportunity to look at the research very closely. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the interesting things that I think about in this chart is like it's cool to see like this is like looking into his brain.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are like every day, every line down here is successive calendar days. So everyone is a day, and that's how many destructive or loving thoughts he had. And then of course there's gonna be days where you're gonna have a hard day where you're gonna be frustrated. And that's okay. That's normal. We don't expect these thoughts to be at zero all the time. I think that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
ludicrous. But to get them to a manageable level so that we're able to have a happy, healthy life,
Mm.
I think is important.
Right.
And I think that it showed that in this intervention. Now, let's talk about why this works or where it even comes from. So, this is a frequency building intervention, and it comes from precision teaching, which began in 1966 at the University of Kansas, and it was developed to bring precision and standardization to educational measurement. And the focus was to measure performance using frequency rather than percentage correct and to track learning over time using the standard acceleration chart. Ogden Lindsley is considered the founder of precision teaching. Now, so they were just using that chart to measure learning activities over time. Then, in the spring of 1968, educators such as Harold Kunzelman and Eric Houghton conceptualized the idea of a 1 minute timing to track and enhance learning. The idea was, hey, let's have them practice and try to practice a behavior or a skill like words read per minute or whatever, and see if that improves their ability across time. And it was first implemented in Ann Starlin and with Ann Starlin by her in her first grade classroom in Eugene, Oregon. And the rationale was if we can measure heartbeats per minute, steps per minute, or mile times, why not learning behaviors like reading, math, and even thoughts? So they had early success, and within a few weeks of implementation, first graders were reading 100 words per minute
Mm.
and writing math answers fluently. One student, Brett, demonstrated that a higher aim than 100 words per minute was appropriate. His fluency showed that faster reading allowed for more cognitive energy for comprehension. And what we found is when we're dealing with basic skills, foundational skills that often need to be built upon, you need to be able to engage in that skill at a certain aim of number of times per minute to be able to go on to the next one and do
Mm.
it fluently. So, you have reading aims, you have math aims, and then we were able to come up with a whole bunch. Like, see
Mm.
this one where it says, see, say letter sounds. When they say 120 to 100 sounds per minute, we put the big number first because we want students to reach to the top. But you need to be able to say letter sounds to be able to blend
Mm-hmm.
letters together to make words. And if you can't say letter sounds quickly enough, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to make words to read the actual word as it is supposed to be read.
Right.
So we have all these that we found: reading, phonemic awareness, math, spelling, handwriting, and there are more.
Mm.
And these are meant to build fluency. And people have seen fluency, they just might not know it. If you ever seen this, I'm sorry if anybody has any flashbacks of having to be in school where they put this on your desk and you're timed for a minute and you got to get as many correct as possible. This is a fluency builder because if you can't do um, basic math facts quickly enough, then when you go into division, you're gonna have trouble. When you go into
Mm.
long division, when you go into other kinds
Mm-hmm.
of maths, if you can't do the foundation, you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
have trouble doing the harder, higher levels.
Right.
So then they expanded it to inner behavior by applying the same timing logic to private verbal behaviors, such as thoughts and feelings. Individuals began timing how many positive or helpful thoughts they could generate within a minute. And this approach was shown to increase positive inner behavior and reduce negative inner behavior over time. And it works, from what we know, we think it works because it draws from Skinner's radical behaviorism. Private events are behaviors too, so they can be influenced by the same principles as observable behaviors. Using 1 minute timings creates a structure for fluency building with inner thoughts. These timings allow for measurement, charting, and decision making, just like with academic skills.
Mm-hmm.
So we use the standard acceleration chart to measure this change across time. I'm not going to get into a big, long lecture about the standard acceleration chart because I love this. I have it on my water bottle because I think it's so important. It's the best way to measure behavior across time. I'm a big nerd about measurement practices. But we do need to use it when we're measuring inner behavior. And there are apps to do it, so you don't have to learn as quickly or whatever. I have a lot of videos too about it, but we use it to measure learning over time in a way that
Mm-hmm.
reveals patterns of change. And it provides a standardized visual display that shows frequency, rate of behavior, acceleration, growth or decline in frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I say frequency,
Mm-hmm.
what I mean is count per unit of time. So,
Mm.
like when you say frequency, like you could think of when you're driving, how many miles per hour. If you're typing, how many words per minute. Those are
Mm-hmm.
all examples of frequency. And it's great because it allows objective decision making in educational and clinical settings. We get real time data and you don't have to wait for weeks on end. You get to look at the behavior and data right now and
Mm.
decide, is this happening at the appropriate level? Is it happening quickly
Mm-hmm.
enough, or do we need to change our intervention because we're not going to meet our goal until 7 months out? So these are things that it's really good for.
Is it so typically when you utilize this acceleration chart, are you looking at expanding the time beyond a minute, or are you looking towards the frequency of the intervention happening?
So we're looking at the frequency. So the cool thing about this is you see up here is his timings of 1
One
minute
minute.
timings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can see every time, every day he practiced and he went higher and higher.
Mm-hmm.
This is the all day count. So
Mm-hmm.
both of these things can live on the same chart.
Mm.
In a non-standard line graph, these
Yeah.
things couldn't live on the same charts just because of the scaling of the axes and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, it's standardized, so everyone looks the same. So if you're looking at 17 of them, you can easily detect what's going on.
Mm.
Everything that you need to know is set
Mm-hmm.
on the chart. It says, what is it counting over here? Destructive, loving thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the behavior? What's their age? Who's the manager? All these things. All
Mm-hmm.
what are the dates? So it's really looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we'll talk about changing the timing of the 1 minute timing a
Yeah.
little bit down the road,
Mm.
but what's really important is it's able to say, this is where we did the timings, and this is where he was in the timings, and this is the all day count. And we can see
Mm.
what happened with his all day count in relation to the timings.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So some key features: semi-logarithmic scale allows for visualization of multiplicative changes, so doubling or halving of behavior. One thing that this standard acceleration chart helped us learn is that behavior doesn't grow by +1 or -1. It multiplies and divides like cells in biology. That's how our behavior grows or decays. And there's also a standard axis, which enables comparison across different learners, behaviors, settings. It's 140 calendar days, which was around the length of time of a semester in school, because this was created for teachers. And it helps with fluency and variability and reveals stability or bounce in performance. Um, Another thing that's really important is it can measure one per day to 1,000 per minute, which is essentially the entire spectrum of human behavior frequencies. The only things that go higher than 1,000 per minute or even kind of touch there, or sometimes drumming.
Mm-hmm.
And then one person might have been able to tap dance at 1,000 per minute or higher, but we can't know because that was a long time ago. The only other thing that I know of that goes higher than that are hummingbirds' wings, and we're not measuring that, so it's okay. And so this one chart can reliably display any behavior in class or in session or in your life without changing the chart, which is really cool because you can make comparisons and see how different things might change different behaviors. Um, and here's one more thing about why we use a chart is that we can actually quantify the change in rate. So a lot of times people say high, low, and then moderate levels of change. But with this, we can actually assign numbers to the level of change, so we can determine just how effective was our intervention because we want to be precise. We want to know what is the change value, right? What's the level of change in the rate of learning? What's the variability? And a lot of times, if you have a really high variability, it means you don't have tight control with your intervention. But if you have really tight variability that's not very bouncy, like it is right here, then you know that you have really tight control in your intervention or in the environment. And then you could also look at the level line and level trend and changes in level from different interventions so you know about where the frequency is of the behavior. And then here's just of why we call it the standard acceleration chart. Accelerate is to increase in rate. Decelerate is to decrease in rate. So if we remove the axes the prefixes of ac and d, we are left with the root word acceleration. Acceleration simply refers to the change without respect to direction. So that's why we call it standard acceleration chart because we're measuring that acceleration. And it helps track private events like thoughts and feelings. And I just laid over the lines from the chart that we just looked at. And it helps us with visualizing inner behavior data, validates lived experiences, and supports self-management. And patterns become clear, such as whether positive thoughts are increasing or anxious thoughts are decreasing, right? Any questions so far?
I think everyone's processing. It's a lot of information, but really good information. It kind of reminds me like every time I see charts like this, I also think like I don't know how closely CBT follows BCBA things, but I do know like part of that is analysis as well too. You know, like utilizing positive and negative um, supports for somebody to change behaviors. So you know they use a lot of, like sticker charts with kids or like those types of
Hmm.
utilization tools. So it kind of reminds me of that as well.
Yeah. And a lot of people think, oh, this is too hard to learn. This is too complex. I'll never understand it. But actually, like 6 year olds learn and chart their own behavior and then teach other people how to do it. So it's just a thing of where, like, you just got to take the time to learn. I'm not going to say it's super easy, but I mean, 6 year olds do it. At Morningside Academy, all the students at Morningside Academy, which is a middle school in Seattle, Washington, they all chart their own behavior and they chart each other's and work with each other. So, I mean, it can be learned. It
Mm-hmm.
just takes effort like anything
Anything else?
else.
Yep.
So I'm going to move away from that technical stuff in the chart and move back to the interventions that might be used. So what is an inner behavior intervention? The most common inner behavior intervention is that 1 minute timing and self-recording procedures to improve private verbal behaviors, i.e., people's thoughts, feelings about themselves. Uh, the person will make a list of their positive and negative thoughts and feelings about themselves. Then they spend 1 minute each day writing down, saying aloud, or thinking and tallying or clicking away as many of the positive items they can and counting up how many were produced in that minute. And then you just try to beat your score the next day. And one of the really cool things about it is like you're just going against yourself, or not against yourself, but you're competing with yourself trying to beat that score. If you don't, that's okay. But you're just trying to improve daily with your own score, because it's your own thoughts and feelings. There's nobody else that you're competing with. And doing this daily 1 minute practice leads to a number of positive thoughts and feelings, the number to increase, and the negative ones typically decrease over the period of weeks. And it's based on that Skinner idea that private events, while harder to observe, are no different in kind from overt behaviors and can be modified using similar procedures. Precision teaching is used to measure, monitor, and make rapid database decisions. So if anybody's like, what is precision teaching? Well, what we do is we detect, we define, detect, and measure behavior across time, and then we make decision rules based upon the data that is being provided. And it's used with whatever intervention, whatever um, uh, lesson plan, instructional design. It's just used to detect behavior, measure it across time, and then make decisions on whether or not the change in behavior is happening fast enough or slow enough or what have you. Additionally, there's been a lot. A lot is a big word. There's been some inner behavior research projects, and so there's a total of 1,064 charts that have been identified for inner behavior research projects with 518 people. So there has been the inner behavior research done. It's just not popularized. It's
Mm.
not well known. And then when it comes to standard acceleration charts, a lot of journals will not publish the
Mm.
standard acceleration chart. They say that it's due to the amount of space on the page, but it's like, bro, like most of the stuff is digital. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, so it's kind of
Mm.
tough for us precision teachers
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, why do you feel like it's not that popularized, or why people don't try to take on this type of work?
Good question. One, people don't know about it. People
Mm.
don't teach about it. The standard acceleration chart used to be on the task list for BCBA for the BCBA exam, but they removed it. So now
Mm.
people don't even have to learn about it. And even
Oh.
when they were being taught about it, they weren't always being taught well because the professor didn't know about it.
Mm.
And then finally, there was a split. This is like inside baseball, but there was a split in behavior science when when behavior analysis kind of became a thing because it was Skinner and then there was this thing the behavior analysis came to be and there was a behavior analysis camp which kind of deviated from Skinner's science and then there was a camp of precision teachers who came and stayed with Skinner's science and the people who stayed with Skinner's science continue to use frequency or count over time as their like datum to measure
Mm-hmm.
behavior, whereas um, behavior analysts use a lot of uh, like percent correct and other
Oh,
kinds of things that they
right.
took from psychology
Yeah.
that kind of left the science. And they don't realize that they've done it because a lot
Mm.
of people don't know that history.
Yeah.
But I read a lot of this old stuff and I
Yeah.
love it, and that's why I know it.
That makes a lot of sense because I am used to seeing a lot of charts with the percentages more so than the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Percent is
Okay.
terrible. I have a whole diatribe about why you shouldn't use percent. I call it percent opportunity occurrence. Ugh. So, it's just a really bad metric for measuring
Mm.
behavior. If Shaq makes one free throw, do we know if he's a good free throw shooter? Is that 100%? And it doesn't also tell you about how much time was involved in the behavior. So if
Mm.
you see like a lot of times I would go to work with like my clients and I would open the book and I was like, oh, they got 100% yesterday. Great. But how long did it take? Because
Mm.
if it took them the whole session to make 100%, that is probably not acceptable. But if it took them 5 minutes, that's great. But I can't tell if I also get 100% and the other person got 100% if we
Right.
have the same fluency of behavior, and it
Wow.
matters. So
I'm so glad
I'll
that you're
leave it
doing
at
this
that.
work. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
again, this is not information that you would know, right? Like if you didn't do the research or you don't know someone who's done the research, then you would just look at the percentage and be like, yeah, that's great.
Exactly. And that's what we're taught also.
Yeah.
So like I don't blame people
Mhm.
for using it because you're taught to use it. But like when you really investigate, you're like, "Oh man, this
Mhm.
is kind of a BS measure." Like
Mhm.
if your student crosses the street at 100%, that sounds great, but it's like what if they're doing it slow, but they do every step correctly? Like you need some pace with your crossing of the street. Like there's a lot of problems with percentage that I just don't think that it gets enough attention.
Right.
But we'll move on to the first inner behavior chart in project ever, done by Ogden Lindsley, the founder of Precision Teaching, and he focused on his urges to smoke cigarettes. So he was over here on the top chart is the number of cigarettes smoked per day, and the bottom is his urges. So we're really getting an inside view on what it looked like in his brain or in his body when it comes to the cigarettes. He introduced an intervention right here that is simply stop if can. He's like, okay, today's the day I'm going to try to stop. And it looks like he did a pretty good job. Now, one thing that you'll see is there's this kind of uh, increase right here, and it's also on the urges to smoke. You want to know what happened?
He was stressed.
He went, well, he actually went to a conference
Oh,
and other people were smoking cigarettes. So
peer
he
pressure.
learned, yeah, and he learned in his environment how to stop smoking. But when he went to another environment that he hadn't learned how to stop smoking, those urges, as you can see, accelerated or jumped up, and then he ended up smoking.
Hmm.
So the cool thing about how he measured this is like a lot of times we have these things that happen in our environment and we don't become keenly aware of them.
Hmm.
But if we actually measure them and take time to measure them throughout our day, we're able to spot, oh, I can connect my thoughts and feelings to this environmental event
Yeah.
now, and then I can kind of see what are my triggers, you
Hmm.
know? And that's one of the best things about this self-monitoring is that people, like just by monitoring, become aware of those things, and you're not having to try to communicate like, what do you think it is? What do you think this is? Like, you
Yeah.
sometimes it's kind of like hard to pull it out of them, but they
Yeah.
just come out of it
Yeah.
on themselves.
I think sometimes it can be really hard to chart this type of information because we have so much influx every day, right? There's so many different elements that it could be a part of. So,
Hmm.
is it the basketball? Is the basketball court? Is it too sunny outside? Is it raining? So I think it's really cool that that we're able to see this in real time of like matching on the data where there's a spike there. But I also know sometimes when I bring that to my clients as well of like, okay, well, like monitoring your thoughts and feelings, but it's really hard for them to be um, in cognizant of what's really impacting them because they don't know. There's so many things that happen in a day.
Exactly. And I wish I had hold on a second. I might have it. Oh yeah. So I actually have these little things that I used to wear.
Oh.
So these are like bead counters that you wear on your wrist.
Mm.
So you just slide the bead over whenever it's like a count of one.
Mm-hmm.
You get to one, and on the other side it has your tens, and then you just slide a bead over so
Mm.
that you can be able to measure. You could use a bead counter, you could use, a watch with the counter, you could use your phone. There's a lot of stuff now, or
Mm-hmm.
you could just tally them if you have like a journal.
Yeah.
Um, but that's how we kind of measure. So you're not necessarily writing down what the exact thought is,
Mm-hmm.
but you're just counting how many times that form or shape of inner
Happened. Yeah.
behavior occurs. And
Mm.
then you're kind of able to like be like, oh, it's happening. And then sometimes people be like, oh, it always happens at 3 o'clock. And that happens to be when my little brother comes in the door. You know what I mean? So then you can
Yeah.
kind of,
Make the
create
pairing.
those
Yeah.
exactly. Um,
Huh.
so now we got to talk about Dr. Abigail B. Calkin, and she is like the godmother of inner behavior research because she wasn't the first one to do inner behavior research, but she like after she learned about it, she like figured out the to add the 1 minute timing. She started collecting all these things. She started having other people do them, and she even helps me with what I'm doing. So she's like the one of the pioneers when it comes to this inner behavior research because of how much work she's done and time she's devoted to this. She showed that people can reliably count and chart their inner thoughts, feelings, and urges, and multiple studies involving hundreds of charted projects demonstrate this. She found that the frequency of inner behaviors like thoughts and feelings typically range from 0 to 82 per day across studies. However, some cases reported frequencies above 100 per day, which is like we have a severe issue usually. The growth patterns or acceleration of inner behavior are similar to the ones of outer behaviors, changing by multiplicative factors rather than additive ones. This is what I said before, how behavior multiplies and divides. It doesn't add and subtract. She helps come up with the using 1 minute timings as an intervention, which can increase the frequency of positive thoughts and feelings counted throughout the day. However, it may have less impact on the acceleration or growth rate compared to academic behavior. So, we need to do some more research. We need to do some more studies to investigate that. And a 1 minute timing of positive self thoughts slash feelings increase the daily frequency of positive thoughts and feelings, but it did not necessarily decrease negative ones in some studies. So other studies did find decreases in negative thoughts and feelings. So we have to kind of investigate because everybody's different and we can't expect everything to work with everybody
Mm-hmm.
the exact same way. So we see some nuance in the research. And then she also argued that these extensive data on inner behavior addressed criticisms that private events could not be scientifically studied or manipulated. So as you can see, like that's a big thing in our
Mm-hmm.
field. And I really want to debunk that because I think that that limits us to be able to help the people we work with and to be able to work with people like you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just like if the entire field is dismissing inner behavior, it's like that leads to a lot of problematic stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk about the types of inner behavior. So inner behavior, like I said before, private events that occur within the skin that are still measurable by the individual. They include thoughts, feelings, and urges. Thoughts are defined as verbal behaviors without a psychological component. Examples are I can do this or I'm not good enough. Thoughts are typically categorized as positive, neutral, or negative, at least in the research that we have conducted so far. Then the feelings are thoughts with an accompanying physiological sensation, like heart racing or tension. Examples are like I feel anxious with a tight chest, or I feel proud with warmth or excitement. And then there's urges, behaviors with physiological bases that often precede an action. So an example is the urge to yell, cry, smoke, drink, or hit. And they often are described as a compulsion to an act that can be either resisted or acted upon. So this matters because we need to define the types of inner behavior and it helps us with clarifying what we're measuring. It gives structure to self-monitoring and charting and supports individualized interventions and empowers personal change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we accept that private and public events are behaviors, as radical behaviors do, our next step is to classify them and create a taxonomy in order to codify and count them.
Mm-hmm. You
Is
have
there a question?
Yeah, there is a question. Amanda's asking, I think the best way I've dealt with negative feelings and thought patterns is by noticing them and approaching them with curiosity instead of judgment. I am a big believer of we are not our thoughts and feelings. How does a behavioral scientist feel about that?
I think that's a great way to do it. And we need to investigate it. I think that one other thing is like what environmental conditions, as a behavioral scientist, I would say, what environmental conditions are occurring that made that thought or feeling pop up?
Mm,
Because that kind of can help us understand, I believe, what
mm-hmm,
might trigger those thoughts and feelings so we can better have a better relationship with our environments, so we can maybe contrive or control our environments so that we can have better behavior, inner behavior or
right.
otherwise.
So more so it's
So
based on what is happening environmentally and that's a causation of our feelings and our thoughts.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the way that I, as a behavior scientist, conceptualize it. Because I have this thing where, like, I'll just say, "Oh man," and I'll say that, and it sounds like I'm just doing it randomly. But I just thought about some time when I was dumb or embarrassed
Mm,
or whatever. So that thought led to my vocal
mm,
behavior. So that's what environmentally occurred. So what in my environment, outsider environment,
right.
might have caused me to come up with that. Maybe I saw an old picture of me wearing
Mm.
tall tee and baggy jeans, baggy to my knees,
Yeah.
thinking, "Why did I do that? This is so dumb, Jared. Pull your pants up." You know?
Yeah. The kids call that cringe.
Yes, yes. So if you have a cringe thought or feeling, you can detect it and measure it, and then kind of detect what's giving the cringe thought or feeling.
Mm,
But detecting feelings can be really tricky. Even for adults, feelings often include both thoughts and physiological responses, and they're sometimes vague or fleeting, making them harder to define or detect. For kids, teens, disabled people, and even adults, it may take time to identify what specific feelings feel like. I think one thing, especially when it comes to men, it's really hard to we call it tacting or identifying a feeling, because we're told like, oh, only men, you don't cry in baseball, you know what I mean, men don't cry, all these things, so you're not only trying to push away a feeling, when you actually feel it, you can be like, you might be like, what is this feeling? I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I was watching the Barbie movie, and have you seen the Barbie movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. When I watched it the first time, I remember Barbie was talking to that old lady in the
Mm-hmm.
white room, right? And
Yeah.
there was the sound and there was like the swelling, and I was feeling something, but
Mm.
I did not know what it
Yeah.
was. And I couldn't identify. I was like, I don't feel sad or happy. And
Mm.
caveman man, I know sad, happy, angry. You know? So like what is let
Yeah.
me I had to dig deeper and really understand
Yeah.
what am I feeling?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And
Yeah.
I, yeah,
Oh no, go ahead.
no, I wasn't gonna say anything.
Oh, I was just gonna say that kind of goes back to your point, right? Of like us having to identify our environments and like what really structurally has happened for you or other people to suppress those thoughts and feelings. So
Exactly.
I think we address that a lot in therapy too, because a lot of times I hear my clients or I've heard other individuals just say like, "Oh, I've never cried before. I've never felt sad before. I don't waste my time thinking about feelings." Or
Mhm.
I just think through my feelings, and that is just such an interesting concept because can you think through a feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's suppressing the feeling is
Right.
really what you're doing, and then that creates other
Mm.
problems later. And it's like it's okay to feel like you are human, therefore you feel. You
Mm-hmm.
feel, therefore you are human. Like you can't go through life without it. I don't think
Mm. Yeah.
personally I can't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So to try to deny it, I think there are some structural environmental conditioning that's done
Mm-hmm.
to try to have people not feel them. And then it's like also maybe your friends are like, stop being a punk. You got to be hard. You got to be
Mm.
tough. It's like I'm not a piece of wood. I don't need to be hard or tough. I can be soft. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so detecting feelings is important.
Yes.
And I think one of the best ways to start is with all day counting and track when
Mm.
feelings occur, even if it's just felt anxious or felt calm.
Right.
And
Right.
don't over fixate on if it's a feeling, if it's this or that at first. Just start noticing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Dr. Culkin said in one of her workshops that really helped me is it's hard to tell when a feeling ends, but we can often tell when it begins. So
Mm.
count those. Count when
Wow.
it begins. Count when you begin feeling the feeling.
Wow. That's so powerful. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, same, same. Because I mean, you would never think about it. Like how long does that feeling last? Let's time it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Especially for someone that's already having trouble detecting the feeling,
Yeah.
that's super difficult. So just
Mm-hmm.
count when it starts, and then you'll start noticing why it start or what's happening around you when it starts.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So a little bit of how we describe our these behaviors. We call it a pinpoint plus, which is a way to define what inner behavior we're focusing on, so the person doing the work can actually know what to look for. So think of it as like making the invisible more visible. And a pinpoint plus has three parts: learning channel, movement cycle, and context. The learning channel is sensory information that come into our body and then the physical out. So it might be see, say. And then the movement cycle is an action verb and an object that receives the action. So maybe says letter. And the context might is where, when, with whom, or with what the behavior is to occur. So when teacher points to letter. So when I say see, say, says letter, when teacher points to letter, everybody knows what that means. The person that's supposed to engage in the behavior knows. The person that's supposed to count the behavior knows. The teacher knows. The parent knows. Everybody knows. And that's why we use a pinpoint plus. Behavior analysts use this thing called operational definition. I have a whole thing on why those are problematic, but in precision teaching, we use a pinpoint plus. And some examples with inner behavior look like these. But before I go into them, I want to say that from behavior science, what we know is that behavior is not emitted, it is permitted by the environment. With these learning channels over here to the right, we can describe ways that sensory information comes in and goes out. And this matrix is specifically for the social, academic, personal, social learning channel, but there are other ones that exist too. So these are ways that sensory information can come in. Free is kind of just like if you're thinking, and we're not able to detect what it is. You know, touch, taste, sniff, see, hear, feel. Like We have touch, so that touch is actually touch. Feel is like an emotion that you might feel.
Mm.
So like for instance, pinpoint might be free say self-critical thought after making a small mistake. So example might be I'm so stupid after forgetting a small detail like a period at the end of a sentence. And then free emote pleasant self-feeling while reflecting on parenting. You might feel warm, a calm feeling when remembering a supportive moment with a child, right? And this matters because the person defines the behavior that they're measuring for themselves based on
Mm.
how it actually feels, sounds, or shows up for them. Instead of a vague goal like be less anxious, we get something that we can actually count. And the bottom line is pinpoint pluses give structure to the work. It respects the lived experiences of the individual and it makes it possible to count real change over time. I have videos and stuff about how you create pinpoint pluses, and so that's its own thing. So I'm not going to go into that here, but I just wanted to go over that because it kind of is going to come up a few times, and it's already come up when we went way back to these. These are all pinpoints. You know, say letter sounds, say name sounds, free say numbers in a sequence. You know, those are all examples of pinpoints that we already saw, but now I'm just kind of giving a name to what it is that we're doing. So let's get into some of the inner behavior research that's been done. Uh, Before we get into that, do we have any questions, comments, concerns?
I think everyone's good.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna go into a video now to explain this one. Let me know if the sound is not working.
Mm.
Hey, yo, have you heard about the study where precision teachers increase confident thoughts in an adolescent with autism? So, this is a story about how a 15-year-old girl with a diagnosis of autism and clinically diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder and depression was able to change the frequency of her despondent or problematic thoughts with 1 minute timings. This intervention that used precision teaching and behavior science was cost effective and easy to implement. Let me tell you about it. So, first, she was assessed by a local university psychology clinic before the study, which diagnosed PTSD after the participant self reported feelings of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation to a school counselor. She also reported frequent thoughts reflecting a negative opinion about herself. The dependent variable or thing that they were trying to change were DTs or despondent thoughts. They were private events or inner behavior that created fear or worry about future events accompanied by a physiological change such as increased blood pressure noticeable to the participant. Some examples of DTs included I'm stupid, I'm a failure, and I hate myself. Prior to the intervention, the participant generated a list of approximately 30 thoughts that were measured via the participant's self report. The participant referred to these exemplars until she can be sure to identify the DT. So, first, during baseline, the participant collected data on the number of despondent thoughts and feelings with a mechanical counter like this. She set the timer on her cell phone for 30 minutes and began self recording. Now, here comes the intervention. She began counting confident thoughts during a 1 minute time trial every day. She listed approximately 30 confident thoughts, such as I'm smart, I can do this, I'm a good friend, I like who I am, I'm a success. Similar to DTs, the list of self generated confident thoughts was used to teach the participant to recognize a confident thought. Here's
Mm.
data on the standard acceleration chart, but I'm going to make it a little bit easier to read. Here's that same data on a standard acceleration chart segment commonly used for journals due to space concerns, but faithfully reports levels of trend or acceleration, level, and bounce or variability. Towards that last day of data collection, she started feeling a lot better and more confident, so she asked to stop the intervention. We love seeing researchers respect assent, and that's what happened here. The participant was given the option to restart the intervention at any time she wanted. She was given the Beck Anxiety Inventory and the Beck Depression Inventory once again, and the results translate from borderline clinical depression at the beginning of the study to a mild mood disorder at the end of the study, leading to a change in her clinical diagnosis. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the fact that she no longer reported having suicidal ideation after the intervention. She even showed some of her friends how to do the timings when they told her that they felt sad. So, what does this tell us? Individuals with autism who are taught to detect and report their feelings can use 1 minute timings to change the frequency of problematic thoughts and feelings. Now, I want to know what you think. Do you think that more people should use this treatment for this kind of problem? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Jared, a precision teacher, behavior scientist, and PhD student at Penn State, Black and here to educate.
No longer
So
student.
yeah, that was made a while ago. Um, but that's this study. And I think that this is really powerful. All the studies that I'm going to show first are just different, either expanded pool of participants and their characteristics, or different interventions or way the intervention was delivered to just kind of show what's been done. So this is a girl with autism or an autistic girl. You got your identity first or person first, depending upon what you want to be identified as. And this was, I think, really interesting because it had somebody that has autism or is an autistic, and they were expressing that they felt depressive and suicidal ideation. And they actually got help. They had already been in therapy during this time, but it wasn't enough. And this helped. And I think one of the things that I'll say at the end, but I'll just say it right now, inner behavior interventions are not a substitute for therapy. They are a supplement. They should go with or and stuff like that. So it's not a replacement for therapy. That's something that I really need to keen and hone in on. But I think one of the really cool things about this study was the fact that she felt this suicidal ideation in the beginning, and at the end she didn't. And this helps with her being able to, at first, not being able to identify confident thoughts and feelings. And then she learned how to identify confident thoughts and feelings and believe them about herself. And I think that's really powerful and important, and it can be effective for other individuals that, excuse me, that are autistic as well, because I don't think enough people think about how autistic people, about their mental health. I mean, they think about, are they able to interact with society, interact with other individuals? Can they do eye contact? Which is, I hate that. I hate that people try to work on that. And then other stuff. So, but sometimes I feel like the mental health of it all gets lost.
Mm.
And I really hope that we can have more individuals that might benefit from this go into it, because I think it could be very powerful.
Mm.
Now, here we're going to go to managing aggressive thoughts and feelings. So instead of despondent, now we're looking at a different flavor, a different shape of problematic inner behavior. Kostwitz et al. Describes a self experiment where the participant used inner behavior intervention to manage his own aggressive thoughts and feelings. There are charts that I'm going to show after, but I'll just describe what went on first. During baseline, he counted and charted his daily aggressive thoughts and feelings for 6 weeks, and self recording alone did not reduce the frequency. So, like we often see, self recording is not typically enough. In the first intervention phase, he added a daily 1 minute counting period where he tallied as many non aggressive thoughts as possible. But this did not significantly affect his aggressive thoughts compared to baseline. In the second intervention, he switched to doing 6 10-second counting periods of non aggressive thoughts spread throughout the day. And this produced an immediate drop in aggressive thoughts. And they alternated between the 1 minute timing and the distributed 10-second counting procedures. And the distributed countings consistently resulted in lower levels of aggressive thoughts. By the end of the second distributed counting phase and final baseline phase, Kostwitz was having mostly zero aggressive thoughts per day, and he attributed the effectiveness of the distributed counting to the frequent prompts throughout the day to relax and think non-aggressively. Once again, the little link, the QR code is a link to a video where I talk about this. But these are the charts, and we can see in the beginning, look at how wide the range of aggressive thoughts are. Those X's
Mm.
are super wide. Then they go to the 1 minute counting time, and there's not a lot of change in the level trend variability. Then you go to the 10-second counters, and we're seeing something. We're
Oh.
seeing like the ceiling get dropped. You know what I mean? And it's becoming a tighter bounce. So we're having a better effect with our intervention. We go back to the 1 minute counting time, and boy oh boy, we still don't really have nothing. But then we go back to the 10 seconds,
Mm.
and then boom, he's getting down to near zero levels. And after, without even doing the 1 minute or
Mm-hmm.
the 10-second, six distributed 10-second counting times, he's able to have a better life with fewer aggressive thoughts and feelings.
Mm.
So we're seeing the way that the intervention is being provided. is different in this instance
Right.
because it's not just a 1 minute counting. He's doing a distributed 10-second counting. So this I think will be really good with people who feel like they have a lot of aggressive thoughts and feelings that want to work on them.
Right.
And I really need to say that people don't want these feelings a lot of the time and they struggle with them. It's still like they want to be aggressive and want to be angry and stuff. It's like, I don't want this feeling, but it's occurring. What do I do? And this
Right.
was one way that this person dealt with it.
I wonder too, and I don't know if this is something that you've experienced too, but when you do those countering thoughts, right? When you're counting like the positive thoughts or non-aggressive thoughts, um, does it matter whether or not the individual necessarily believes the things that they're saying?
Good question. And I'm going to get to it, but I'll say it now. Um, Dr. Calkin says to people, even if you don't necessarily believe them right then, still add them to your list because you will begin to believe them in the future. I kind of, when I tell the kids that I work with in middle school, I tell them, you know how your grandma might say that you're really handsome, or you're really beautiful, and you might not believe it. It's like, okay, grandma, you're supposed to say that. Add that to your count. And then over time, you'll begin to believe it because you're working with it, you're mixing it in with all these other things that you believe, and then you become more confident and you have these positive thoughts that you can really attribute to yourself over time. So let's look at another characteristic, a different participant characteristic in the study, in the research. Senior citizens and self-management of positive and negative inners. So this study evaluated a 66-year-old female participant's self-management of positive and negative inner behaviors. The cool thing about this study is it changes the characteristics of the participant and it also changes the intervention. So the study had several conditions with baseline, then times counting of positive inners like the 1 minute timing, then response prompt procedures that included SAF meds, which are say all fast minute every day shuffle. They're basically flashcards where you have a term on one side and then you have the definition on the other. And these ones actually were just words. And it was a personalized worksheet. And then we have a return to baseline and a follow-up assessment. So you'll see how it goes during the times counting intervention. Positive inners accelerated during the counting periods, but had less impact on daily totals. The response prompt procedure, especially the personalized worksheets, were most effective in increasing daily positive inners and decreasing negative inners. So positive inners continued to accelerate and negative inners decelerated further during the return to baseline and follow-up, suggesting maintenance of the intervention effect. So let's look at those charts. So in the beginning over here during A is simply intervention or baseline. So no intervention. Those X's are higher than the dots. That's how we know there's a problem. Then they try the 1 minute timing, and we see almost some crossover, but it's not that big of a difference. Then they try so they have 1 minute timing, they try the 30-second timing, then they try the 45-second timing, then they go back to a 30-second timing again. And they just keep on messing with the timings, and the timing isn't separating these positive and negatives enough for the individual.
Mm.
So they go on to have these response cards, which are basically being able to see awesome, fantastic, spectacular. So instead of her generating them off the top of the dome, she's seeing them and then saying them either out loud or to herself. And that's when we see the opening of the quote unquote jaws, like
Wow.
a shark, and we can see them separate the positives and negatives. And then we can see over time those negatives decelerated and those positives stayed high. And then after a few weeks, they went to go get maintenance to see, oh yeah, so those negatives are over here and those positives are still high, so that we can see that there was a good effect across time. And I think that's a really good way too. Is like, maybe you're having trouble generating these thoughts yourself because that happens, especially in the beginning. So then you might use a card where you like write down as many as you can and then read them. And then it happened that the all day counts were able to change where the negative thoughts and feelings decelerated and the positive thoughts and feelings accelerated. So here's another one where they completely changed what they're measuring. This person measured their detection of forgets. So they wanted to forget less. So like let's say I use all the time. I'm hungry, I'm going to the fridge, and I open the fridge and I'm like, what did I come in here for? And this person, before the intervention, tracked her forgets or lapses in memory or follow through, using a risk counter to establish baseline frequency during the 10-week intervention phase. Melissa added daily 1 minute sessions of verbalizing pre written self statements, affirming improvements in her memory while continuing to track forgets. Over the course of the intervention, the frequency of Melissa's forgets decreased compared to baseline, and her efficiency in verbalizing self statements increased. After the intervention ended, Melissa continued tracking forgets without self statements, and the reduction in forgetfulness was largely maintained, suggesting a lasting effect of the intervention. From an average of 12 forgets a day to 0 to 4 a day, and the intervention lasts 10 weeks. So that's another really interesting area. If you feel like you're really forgetful, this might be helpful. Once again, this is the only, there are not enough studies on this to really understand, to really, like, we need more studies, basically. We need more research, which is why I decided to do my dissertation on this kind of stuff. Um, and I have more charts of just other stuff, but I kind of want to get past that for now. This is like a 3.5 year old telling their teacher that they had selfish thoughts. And we can just see that, the behavior went down in level from up here, which is pretty interesting. And then just some more different charts. This one, super interesting, but some people don't think it's inner behavior. Dr. Calkin thinks it's not inner behavior, even though it was when it came out, but she says it's not inner behavior. I think it's inner behavior, and let me tell you about it. This person measured the number of times they felt their baby have fetal movements, or their fetus have fetal movements. And they systematically observed and quantified fetal movements across gestational age. And this demonstrates that private behaviors can be measured empirically. Now, Dr. Calkin and some others believe that it's not a private behavior of the pregnant woman. They think that the fetus is the one behaving. So that's that behavior of the fetus. So it's like, whose behavior is it? When does it become a person kind of thing? We don't need to get into that. But the really cool thing is that it helped us um, document the time course of prenatal motor development in humans, showing that different movement patterns have different onset times and frequency trajectories as gestational progress. And monitoring this time course could potentially help detect neurodevelopment or pregnancy issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that there's early rates where there's acceleration, then the acceleration and maintenance, and then the deceleration of fetal movements till birth. They were able to detect when the baby was about to be born based on these decelerations to birth more accurately than doctors were able to project. And that was really cool. Also, this was done in the 70s. No, we're not gonna shame for what they didn't know in the 70s. But women who were measuring their fetal their the fetus movements who had alcoholic beverages noticed that the fetal movements decelerated when they drank.
Mm.
So they're like, "Oh my God, my baby's drunk and not moving," which was problematic. And they realized, and a lot of women that's like immediately stopped drinking uh, during their pregnancy, which I guess at the time was not
Mm-hmm.
as well known as it is now. It wasn't around during the 70s. Don't know what it was like. Not shaming nobody, but this is really interesting stuff that they found.
Yeah.
So, and this was published in the journal Nature, or no, in Science,
In
which
science.
is the whole journal's name is Science, which is like
Wow.
a big journal. So
Interesting. Yeah, metabolic rates are so important in like different substances and how environmentally, right? Like whether it's
hmm
alcohol or something else can really impact yourself and whatever else is inside you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
exactly.
Oh.
So here's my inner behavior. I
Oh.
didn't track all day long, unfortunately, but I did track my 1 minute timing. I started off with 12. I was only able to come up with 12 positive thoughts about myself when I started this in my 1 minute timing.
Mm.
But I went on, went on. I read more. I learned that I should have an aim. So the aim is actually 50 per minute. Once I got to 50 per minute, I started noticing some really awesome things. One, for whatever reason, I was playing basketball better and more confidently, and people were asking me if I wanted to come play basketball at different times because I started having noticeable change in my game. Um, and even there was a person that I had to be in communication with on often. And during a conference, they said something to me that would usually make me feel bad, but as soon as they said it, I felt like I had a shield up, and it blocked that bad feeling. I was like, "No, I'm smart. I'm amazing. I'm dope. I'm a great shooter and passer in basketball. Like that can't hurt me now." So it felt like I had like a shield thanks to this practicing, or at least I attribute it to thinking in this practicing because it usually would have made me not feel well at all. So my research is working with middle schoolers in anxiety. This is not current research. This is a pilot study that I already ran. So what I would do is I would do an interview beforehand, then we would do baseline, then intervention with the 1 minute timings. So here's students named Professor Oak, Groot, and Football. They all got to choose their own names. I always love to let them choose their own names because it's always hilarious. So Professor Oak said that before it was more of just I hated anxiety, but now it's more as kind of a protective mechanism. Now stress is easier to cope with because now it's more the mechanism instead of just anxious thoughts or feelings that block any work from really getting done. Situations are usually less stressful and more manageable, and they felt like their anxiety would follow them from home to school and school to home, whereas now it wasn't doing that. Then Groot said, I think that they've gotten better and I don't have as many um, anxious thoughts. She came up with, when I come up with an anxious thought, I try to think of a positive one. So that substitution. And then she also came up with, if I can't think of a positive thought, I feel like I should talk to somebody about
Hmm.
that. So these are like things that she came up with herself that I had no help in coming up with. And then the participant football said, I feel like they just don't have anymore. And you could see that how that behavior just decelerated. And we counted during their most anxious class. Um, and they said they think that the 1 minute timing definitely helped because it's like you can see the numbers decrease every day. So they were looking at their standard acceleration chart because they were inputting the data and they were watching the behavior decrease. And they said that they're doing better in school than they were and better in grades overall. Groove even reported that she started participating in class more. So the anxiety going down, confidence going up, able to engage in school at a better way. So that was my like pilot study. I'm running another one now, and when I have those data, I'll share. Um, so let's talk about how to conduct an interbehavior intervention. You follow the 4 steps of pinpoint, record, change, try again. Get baseline data after identifying the pinpoint and have baseline for 5 to 10 days. Then use frequency building of that 1 minute timing procedure while still measuring the all day count and display the data on the standard acceleration chart to make necessary changes to the intervention as needed. Now, Dr. Abigail Calkin just came out with like a blog on our website, and she explains everything really well, really simply, really quickly, and she talks about how to begin and how to implement. So I would highly suggest looking at her website um, because it has amazing information. And I feel like I'm going fast, but I want to get to this thing that we're going to do next called a timing. So everybody, please get a pen and a pencil or a pencil and a piece of paper or something to write with. I'll be using my clicker because I will do this timing with you. We are going to set a timer for 1 minute, and then we're going to try to generate as many positive thoughts
Mm.
about ourselves that we can in that 1 minute. So don't repeat any positive thoughts. So no same ones. Try to keep them short so you can have more. So instead of "I am a good husband," just say "good husband." And then it can be something that somebody said about you, just like before. Even if you don't believe it yet, you can still add to it, add it to your list. And at the time it ends, after the timer ends, let's count up the total number of tally marks.
Mm.
If you are willing, please type into the chat how many positive thoughts you were able to generate. Are you ready?
I have a question. So related to this, because a lot of times people say that writing the thought versus like typing it out has a different impact on it too. Do you feel like it's important that it's with pen and paper versus typing?
I don't have research to determine whether
Oh.
what exists, what it is, but for me, I say just do a tally. Just
Mm.
you don't have to write down the
Yeah.
actual
Mm-hmm.
thing. Just think it and tally it because we want to
Mm.
know how many the total number. That's
Yes.
what's most important right now.
Okay.
All right. Sound good to you?
Let's go.
All right. I'm gonna set my timer. Ready, set, please begin. Stop. All right. Now let's count up how many we have. If you can share it in the chat, that would be fantastic. If you did it, if you didn't, I totally get it. And I want to see. Okay, we got somebody in the chat that said 21.
Whoa!
Fantastic. I got 42.
Whoa!
Well, I mean, I already went up
Okay.
to practice. Yeah.
That's true.
You
You got your practice
yeah.
in. I was like, I got to 6 and I was like, oh no. So
Yeah,
I got 12 in total. So I think I'm where you started like 3 years ago.
exactly. So I mean, it's hard because especially
Yeah.
if it's something that you don't practice,
Mhm.
it's something that's going to be difficult. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that number that you had today, and then you're going to just try to beat your score tomorrow. That's all you're trying to do. And we want to try to get up to 50 if we can, right? That's like the minimum goal is 50 so we can get fluency, which is the fluid combination of accuracy plus speed, which characterizes competent performance.
Wow.
And once we get to those levels, it
Mm.
really helps us and we are able to have beneficial things.
Mhm.
So, like I said, aims free write 35 to 30 if you're actually writing all this stuff out. Free
Mhm.
say 75 to 50, free click 75 to 50. For the 1 minute daily timings of writing positive self statements, the aim is to reach 30 to 35 statements per minute. For saying
Hmm.
it, 50 to 75. And you think about which learning channels because certain learning channels make it easier. Having
Right.
the clicker is easier for me than the tally because then I'm like, where am I tallying? Make sure I don't tally over the same one.
Mhm.
It's a lot of stuff. So just clicking I found was easier for me. Um, and then if you're having trouble, here are some lists of
Oh.
positives that you can add if you think that they apply to you. Add these positives, good brother, good friend, good listener, pleasant, asset. One of the things that I like to do is um like I say good skin tone, like good hair. I try
Mhm.
to add these things that a lot of times society might say is bad because of or it's not
Oh.
in proximity to white European
Mhm.
standards of beauty. And I just say I'm adding them to my positives. So now I can be
Mm.
confident and proud of these things that are just the way that I was born.
Mhm.
And then I don't feel so othered or non-beautiful or attractive because I
Mhm.
don't meet those Eurocentric standards of beauty.
That's so interesting too, because I feel like, yeah, we're talking about environment, right, and like how that really impacts the way that we perceive ourselves or the way that we relate to ourselves. And I know a lot of individuals I worked with in the past who have had some type of body dysmorphia or had issues, eating disorders and things like that. When I asked that question earlier about like, what if you don't really believe it? It really comes from them, from those clients of them feeling like, you're telling me to say these positive things about myself, but I don't feel them, and how
Hmm.
important it is for them to have that feeling. So I think that this would be really beneficial, especially when you have that data to back it up, right? And be like, it
Hmm.
works. Like people have done this, and people have been very successful at changing those thoughts and actually feeling that feeling. Wow, exciting.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think all the things you said are exactly right, and it's something that we got to work on ourselves. And
Mm.
some of the kind of research I want to do is like looking at like how social media affects our thoughts
Ooh.
and feelings because even the people that we see on like magazines and on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, they don't look like that themselves. So
Yep.
how does that impact our own self-image of ourselves, especially young girls and young boys looking at these
Mm-hmm.
things, thinking that this is the standard of beauty, well, that doesn't even exist in the real world.
100%.
So some of the benefits of reaching those fluency aims that I talked about earlier are it helps us in multiple areas. Application, we can apply it to similar problems. Retention, we're able to engage in the behavior at high levels even after a long time of not practicing. So I was able to get 42, even though I haven't practiced and done that for a year or whatever. We can help it with endurance, so we're able to do it for longer periods of time than just, a small amount of time. Adduction, so we can have same behavior, new environment, combining behaviors to have a new behavior, new environment. And then also stability, so we can be able to engage in the behavior even in the face of distraction. Like some students who don't have high fluency of being able to read words per minute, if there's like a lawnmower going off outside, they're not going to be able to continue to read quickly because they haven't met that fluency aim. Excuse me. Um, So yeah, next, some common benefits of inner behavior interventions. As one of them is the identification of antecedent events or events that evoke or trigger negative, angry, despondent thoughts and feelings. We talked a little bit about those. And then we can have resistance to the effects of those antecedent events once we do our 1 minute timings. Reported improved quality of life, visual display of inner behavior across time with that standard acceleration chart, a change in the relationship with the target behavior. Now you may have a better relationship with your confidence because you've worked on it. And then there's also a lot of unintended benefits, like I said, doing better in basketball or what my client in football, he was the smallest football player on the team. He always felt anxious about it, but now he felt more confident and it felt good going out into the field. Um, Now, a lot of people are probably going to be like, what do I do if I'm stuck at a low level of positives per minute? Like I said before, it's okay to start low. Many people begin with only a few positives per minute, and that is normal. Low counts might reflect years of reinforcing negative self talk or under practice self affirmation. So try the see say intervention. Take your written list of positives and read them aloud for 1 minute. This uses the see say learning channel when you see it and say it. And examples are read resilient, love, learn fast, and etc. And it helps because it models the correct behavior when you're hearing yourself say it. It supports recall and fluency, especially when your mind draws a blank, especially the longer the minute feels. Towards the end of that minute, it gets really hard. And it boosts momentum by increasing frequency and reducing hesitations. So you can just look at one of these lists and you can go for a minute and go through those, especially if you want to pick out certain ones that you feel you really identify with. And then it can be easier for you to be able to accelerate your number per minute. And then real quick with the validity, I talked about this earlier in the beginning, the IOA, the Inner Observer Agreement. It's just a measure of believability, not accuracy. And a behavior is only accessible to the person experiencing it. I can only know what I'm thinking. So requiring a second observer ignores the fundamental nature of private events, as shown in precision teaching research. Valid measurement of internal inner behavior is possible through consistent self-recording and pattern stability over time. And replication is the gold standard. In most sciences, replication, not agreement between observers, is the benchmark of reliability. Precision teaching researchers have consistently replicated findings across decades and populations. This consistency is the real indicator of validity. The acceleration chart allows patterns to be detected visually, enabling judgment of meaningful change, even in private events. And precision teaching makes it possible. The standard acceleration chart uses frequency, acceleration, and bounce to evaluate inner behavior over time. These metrics provide a transparent, analyzable record of change, even for behavior no one else can see.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm almost done with the slides so we can have a discussion. But here's some things that we know about inner behavior through the standard acceleration chart. Inner behaviors can be counted and changed, as we've seen. Inner and outer behaviors share the same behavior laws, so they respond to antecedents and consequences, and they accelerate or decelerate with interventions. Positive and negative behaviors function independently. So a decrease in negative doesn't always mean an increase in positive, and vice versa, which is also true of our outer behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Like students, sometimes when they're doing those math sheets, they might have a higher number of corrects, but they might also have a higher number of incorrects because they're going so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of got to figure out what intervention works to decrease the undesirable behavior and keep that desirable behavior at higher levels. People can self monitor with high consistency. Inner and outer behaviors can change independently or together. And self awareness and fluency grow with practice. The longer people count and chart inner behavior, the more accurate and insightful they become about their own inner behavior. So some intervention tools for inner behavior that gold stars, because I think the gold standard of inner behavior interventions is the 1 minute timing when you generate your own thoughts and feelings, like we just did, where the learner says, writes, or thinks as many positive thoughts or helpful feelings as possible in that minute. Then there's the CSA practice, so reading from that list. There's also the all day counting, which is where you're measuring all day your total number of positive and negative thoughts and feelings. Now, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. We need research with diverse populations across different races and ethnicities. Pretty much all the research has been white people. So we need to go out and get some research with different races and ethnicities. And we need studies with younger children, elders, and people with disabilities as well. We also need long term follow ups because few studies examine whether gains in positive inner behavior or reductions in negative maintain over time. So you want to come back and see. And we want to see that maintenance, generalization, and relapse prevention needed for greater focus. And one thing that I'm really interested in doing, which I'm definitely going to get into once I get my PhD, is going into urges and addiction and substance use. More work is needed on how inner behavior interventions can target urges related to addiction, cravings, and compulsive behaviors. This includes applications for smoking cessation, alcohol use, and other substance related patterns. I think this is
Mm-hmm.
really good for like in undergrad, a lot of people get like become alcoholics because they never really drink like that. Then
Mm-hmm.
in America, in undergrad, all of a sudden there's a lot of drinking, and then you leave undergrad, and you're supposed to all of a sudden stop drinking, and not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be really interesting to kind of research and see what interventions can help those kind of inner behaviors. And then also limitations and ethical considerations. Not all inner behavior needs to change. Feelings of sadness, fear, or anger are human and not inherently bad. And we should not expect all negative thoughts and feelings to be zero.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to respect autonomy, consent, and assent. Allow individuals must be part of defining their own pinpoint targets and be allowed to stop and start when they want. And then also therapeutic consideration. This is not a replacement for therapy. Inner behavior interventions can support and supplement, but not replace professional mental health care. Want to make sure that is known. Not coming for your job, trying to work with me. Um, so yes, you can change your own inner behavior. Thoughts, feelings, and urges are behavior. Behaviors can be counted. Counted behaviors can be changed. And this is what makes inner behavior measurable, meaningful, and improvable. Your inner life is not invisible. It's observable. It's valid, and it's
Mm-hmm.
yours to change. And I'll end on this quote from Ogden Lindsley. Charting may be one of the few sensitive techniques that we have to keep track of these inner thoughts, feelings, and urges. It could be that precision teaching will ultimately provide man with the most good and the most help by being applied to his inner behavior. It is one of the few ways to chart and change inner behavior. And that's him talking to B.F. Skinner back in the day, his teacher. So we'll do questions, but these are my citations. And anybody that came late, if you want to access my slides, then you could simply use this QR code to access all the slides, or just go to my website, jaredvan.com, and go to the inner behavior PowerPoint.
Oh. Wow, wonderful, Jared. You did such a wonderful job. I'm so thankful for your knowledge, for your time, for everything that you've given into this presentation, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to present it in other platforms as well because this information is so valid and so important. I think it really does bridge like behavioral, your work, therapist work, as well as other shared identities and holistic treatments that we utilize, both scientific and holistic, in order to support, like you said, at the end of the day, it's really just about supporting individuals and helping them to become better versions of themselves. What I really feel like when you talk about inner behavior, something that comes to mind for me is really this idea of like when I work with a client, right? They feel those inner behaviors are very isolating, right? This is something I feel. No one understands what this feels like, what these thoughts do to me. Sometimes we have these diagnoses for individuals similar to substance use or addiction, OCD, things that really um, have these negative behaviors and or thought patterns that are very very difficult for people to get out of, things that they don't necessarily want to feel or think, but they just inherently do, whether that's environmental or biological or whatever it is. So when you're working with individuals and you're trying to talk to them about helping them to reduce those negative thoughts or those negative behaviors, do you feel like it takes a lot of time for you to understand, um, or do you take the time? Is it important to take the time to understand the the history of it all, of like how they've gone to the place they are, or do you really start with them where they are in that moment? If that makes sense.
It's, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's a great question. I think that there's a few things that relate to that question. One is I don't want to step out of my lane.
Mm.
I can't do the same thing that you do. I don't know how to do it. I'm not trained in it, so I shouldn't be doing that. What I can do is work with where they are.
Mm.
And one thing that I do as well is try to build that therapeutic alliance or to build rapport with the people that I'm working with
Mm-hmm.
to be able to understand who they are and what's going on in their life and be able to kind of help them with where they are and where they're going. And we can talk about definitely
Mm.
why they might be where they are, but I don't know, and I don't think that I have all the skills to be
Mm.
able to fully unpack all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already told by my girlfriend Krista that I don't ask enough questions. So I know that that's like one thing that I need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this could supplement,
Mm-hmm.
you know, typical therapeutic practices. But I don't want to go into something that I
Mm-hmm.
don't have any business doing because I don't have the training, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely, and I appreciate that. Mm. Any thoughts from the? Oh, Krista says, I think it's useful for people dealing with developmental disorders and talk therapies contradict. Yes, I agree, very much so. Because I think like there's also this misconception. I think it's a little bit of a misconception that BCBAs only work with individuals that have autism. Like
Yeah,
that's the primary focus of what you do. But I also think, as we've just learned, that this behavior can be helpful for all types of different individuals, with or without diagnoses.
exactly. I think that what it is uh, there has been a lot of success with BCBAs working with students with
Mm.
autism. So that's where the money kind of goes. So that's what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are seeing. A lot of times when you see a BCBA, it's because a student has autism or a student has behavior problems, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we kind of go. But it's what's interesting is there are BCBAs or people with behavior analytics, behavior scientific backgrounds that work in different organizations, work at like Coca-Cola, people that actually work. I know a BCBA that works with the Chargers, the Los Angeles
Oh,
Chargers, so football teams.
no.
So our realm is like here's a SAF man. Um, behavior is the activity of living organisms. So that's my realm, the behavior of living organisms. That's my lane, and so long as it has to deal with that, that's what I'm dealing with. So
Oh.
part of behavior are our inner behavior, our private behavior. So we can work with that too. But yeah, I hate the idea that we can only work with people with autism because yes, we can and we do, and that's great. And we can also work with individuals that are in a gen ed class that need help with whatever, with math, with spelling, with writing, as you saw
Mm-hmm.
throughout what precision teachers have done
Yeah.
across time.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you bring that up too, because I don't know if anyone in the audience is listening to this, but I know that there's also sometimes there's this question between people trying to get their masters. Do I go towards like BCBA work or do I go towards MFT or LPC work? And like a lot of people will say, "Oh, pick the LPC route because you have more opportunities or more options in regards to what kind of work you end up doing." And it's like that's not true. There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that you can do with your degree, and a lot of times sometimes even the position doesn't exist yet. You kind of have to create that own path for yourself.
Absolutely. And like I know this team ABA
Mm,
who works with sports performance, and they
so
use
cool.
the student acceleration chart, and they work with basketball, track, softball, baseball, volleyball, and some other stuff where they're actually improving sports performance.
So
So
cool.
so long as it's behavior, it's in our realm.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone in the chat have any questions, any thoughts about all that knowledge that Jared just spilled out? I will. For you, Jared, what do you feel like post grad is where you would like to see yourself and the work that you do?
I like to see myself as a professor that is teaching and doing research. I have a lot of ideas when it comes to not only inner behavior, I want to do more research in that, but also with the chart, it's been found in some really old research that I dug up that it's the only non-biased measure of learning because a
Hmm.
lot of the measures of learning that we have, pretty much all of them, are racially biased
Hmm.
and biased based on socioeconomic status. Whereas the standard acceleration chart measures learning across time and it's not biased in those ways. And I want to do more research to like
Hmm.
show that so that perhaps we can use that to measure learning across time, measure if somebody has a learning disability, instead
Hmm.
of using these measures that we already know are biased in
Hmm.
those ways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's so important too, kind of what you were mentioning, because I think like a lot of the historical, not just in your field, I think in a lot of psychology, right? A lot of them historically have been tests that are done on predominantly cis hetero white people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we need to expand that characteristic pool.
Hmm.
Hopefully we can with the current administration, which is why I want to move back to California because I feel like I'll have more wiggle room.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's so important that we get people that look like you, that look
Hmm.
like me, as participants in
Hmm.
safe research, and then also people that look like you and look like me as researchers,
Hmm.
because we bring valuable
Hmm.
cultural information that not everybody's gonna know.
Hmm.
Like, for instance, I was talking to one of my friends who's a BCBA, and she was working with a student and trying to work with her, like doing the training or whatever. And there were kids that had autism, and they were supposed to get a comb and brush their hair. And there was one black kid with dreadlocks, and he just held it and he looked at it like, mm-mm. And then the one of the white people that were trying to help the kid was like, "Oh, this is how you comb your hair." And you can't use a comb like that, a tooth comb, for dreadlocks. And they didn't know that. And so the person that was black in the room had to be like, no, he's not reacting on this because there's a problem with, like, he doesn't know how to use it.
Right.
That's not the appropriate tool for his hair.
Hmm.
So do you call that DEI, or do you just call that being able to be culturally responsive in the different environments? If
Hmm.
everything is targeted to cis hetero white males that are Christian, then that's all you're going to be able to typically work with and help, because
Hmm.
there is nuance across different
Hmm.
characteristics of individuals.
100%. Yeah, and a lot of times I've seen a lot of studies that don't take into consideration that they don't have cultural considerations within their testing, and they don't. There's a lot of bias, right? Like there's a lot of bias when it comes to testing. So it's all really, really important. I try to influence, or I try to help people to understand that when you are looking at research too, you need to look at who's funding it, who's benefiting from it, who was this written for, and who's writing it. Because not just because it was published does not mean necessarily that it is a very viable source.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do that not a lot of people do, I've realized, is if it's about a study and I'm kind of questionable about it, I will copy and paste the researchers' names and I'll look them up. What do you look
Mm-hmm.
like? What is your past research in? And then if you're doing some research and I don't necessarily think that the excuse me, the results are, quite right,
Mm-hmm.
then I might, look that up. And interestingly enough, there's been like a lot of research where like somebody publishes something, it's really messed up, and then there's like a lot of responses and backlash and
Mm.
comments, and the whole community is like, I can't believe they published this. I can't believe they thought this was okay.
Right.
And then the community is like, hey, no, that's not okay. That's not true. Because yeah, yeah, I've seen it, and
It
it can
happens.
be really, yeah, it happens all the time, and it's wild who and what gets published. And just because it's published doesn't, I mean, we need that replication. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? We need to see, okay, you found this one time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I could do the same thing and find the same thing. And if not, then we need to understand where the discrepancy lies.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Um, the chat is so quiet. I wonder if they're they're just really trying to process a lot of the things that you've said. I do think that it's very beneficial, and I wonder too, because like you've obviously done your own minute study on yourself.
Mhm.
Do you think it's beneficial for people to practice this on their own with themselves?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's one of the best ways to really understand yourself. I mean, you get to become more intimately connected with your environment, with how different things affect you, and then you become more. It's easier to detect different things that a lot of times people just be like, I don't know why I was feeling like that, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
know this, or I don't know this. But then when you start seeing
Mm-hmm.
patterns that are reliable across time, you're better able to nitpick it. And
Mm-hmm.
like one of the things I thought about myself is like I always thought like, oh, I don't care if somebody tries to tell me what to do. I mean, I'm not gonna always do it. It doesn't really affect me like some other people. Then I started making content. People started telling me what kind of content I started needed that they wanted me to make, and sometimes it frustrated me. I'm like, oh, this is new. This is
Mm-hmm.
a new feeling that I didn't think I felt. So kind of becoming more aware with my emotions
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot.
Yeah, and people grow, you know. We constantly change over time, so I think it'd be very interesting too to be able to implement this kind of study on yourself, and in time, right, to see gradually how having those potentially positive thoughts and decrease of negative thoughts, how that impacts your behavior in the future and the things that you start to do. I think our work is very similar because when I did my dissertation was on self efficacy and how to build self efficacy in yourself. So really, this understanding of like if you feel like you can do it, if you perceive that you can do it, that you will make those choices for yourself. Um, and I think that what I've learned over from that very small study, I worked with a lot of it was predominantly foster youth, previous foster youth who were going into higher education. So what I heard a lot of them say through our study was that the reason that they felt like they could do it was because someone else told them that they could, not necessarily their inner thought, but someone else telling them that they were smart, that they were capable, that the foster system is broken and it's not their fault. So imagine how powerful that could be if your environment is
Mhm.
telling you one thing and you also believe or inherently start to absorb those things. I don't know. So many things
Yeah,
would happen and change in our world.
yeah.
Mm.
You need positive examples. You need these opportunities and options, and I don't think that there's enough of it. And when it comes to this research, I think it's a really powerful way we can help. Because also like the kids that I'm working
Mm-hmm.
with, I'm just meeting them. They don't want to tell me all these things,
Right.
all the anxious thoughts that they're feeling,
Yeah.
So just being able to say this is the number of times that I felt this
Mm-hmm.
feeling can be a little bit more freeing,
I
you
like that.
know? So,
You have a comment in the chat there. Aaron says, "I do love all this. I especially love standard celebration. I don't know how to incorporate it into insurance-funded work. Um, I would also love to contribute to research, but I don't even know how or where to begin."
okay. Great comment question, reach out to me. We can be research partners.
Yeah.
Um, and then when it comes to the insurance side,
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are a lot of people that work on insurance. I'm like literally not in
Mm.
ABA company, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving further away from ABA and closer to education, special education. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the answer. But if you come to the Standard Acceleration Society conference
Ooh.
in November
Mm-hmm.
in where is it going to be? Savannah, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to acceleration.org, you can come to that conference, and I'm sure there are a lot of people
Interesting.
that can tell you how you can incorporate it with insurance.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a lot of people there are BCBAs that
Mm-hmm.
incorporate all types of stuff, and I know even my friend Meg Solomon, who on Instagram is under Across Environments, she utilizes inner behavior and ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy,
Yes. Yeah.
and she merges them together. And I don't know if she goes
Interesting.
to insurance or not, but I
Mm-hmm.
know that she does that with a lot of her clients.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
can't speak specifically for BCBA, but just like as somebody that does take insurance for my practice, what I can say is that typically the documentation process, right? Insurance is really just looking for, does this person have an issue? Are you resolving it? Are you working towards benefiting them? Or is this, I guess, similar to analysis, right? Like you just want to make sure that
Hmm.
this is trending in a positive way. So a lot of times when we write our notes for insurance, I'll be honest, I don't put a lot of information there. First of all, I don't trust the insurance company and what they're going to do with your information. So most of my
Hmm.
notes just say engaged in conversation about life problem, engaged in intervention that supports individual outside of therapy. That could be anything.
Hmm.
So I think really there's like an art to it of the way that you can get that funding for that individual, and also having conversations with that person too, because we also know, right, like providing diagnoses for people. Diagnoses were created by cis hetero white men, and a lot of times it doesn't take cultural considerations into play. It doesn't take the trauma, the individual work that you've done, your life experiences into why you're presenting with these symptoms. So a lot of times when I talk to my clients too, I say, let's not really think about too much about the diagnosis. I have to give you this diagnosis so it can get paid, but that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with whatever the symptom is that you're saying you're having, the thing that's causing you trouble. That's what's more important than what it says on the paper.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's funny that you mentioned the symptoms is a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people say like, "Oh yeah, this inner behavior intervention is just getting at the symptoms and it's not getting at the root cause."
Hmm.
And the people that say that often aren't even able to deal with the symptoms. So they're complaining about not getting to the root cause when what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even solve the symptoms, which are the reason why
You.
we're seeing people. So it just, it boggles my mind
Yeah.
all these things people come up with.
Oh my gosh. Well, Jared, it was so wonderful having you on today. I think we could talk about it for hours. And I think
Hmm.
if anyone wants to continue to follow you and your work, anyone who's new to Jared, Jared does short form content on TikTok and Instagram. We will put those links in the chat. Also, we are raising funds today for SF Bay Area Mutual Aid. Even past the stream, you can still continue to donate if you feel so inclined. And anything else that you'd like to tell the folks out there, Jared? Anything coming up for you, or anything you'd like to invite people to? Any talks?
Well, one thing that I want to do
Mm-hmm.
is I want to live stream my dissertation.
Oh,
So I might do that if I get consent from my committee
okay.
and if the school shares, because like school says you can have whoever you want at your dissertation.
Mm.
But what if I want my, online community? Because I feel like I've grown this,
Yes.
this platform, and I'm like, not a lot of people have seen what a dissertation looks like.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be really great for,
Mm.
educational purposes
Mm-hmm.
to be able to put my dissertation up. I'm not going to be replying to people in the chat,
Of course.
but they'll be able to see what a dissertation looks like, and
Mm.
maybe it can encourage people to, go get their PhD,
Wow.
especially as we're hearing that, black men aren't going to college and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So just seeing somebody doing it can really help, as you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And 'cause I didn't have a black teacher until my PhD program, and I
Wow.
had a whole bunch of black and brown
Mm-hmm.
professors of male and female,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah, men and women. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, definitely. We need more individuals like you in higher education advocating for these types of studies, doing the studies, and also people participating in the studies. So yeah, let us know. We'll definitely put a plug for that. I would love to watch your dissertation. I find them very exciting myself, especially when I'm not the one doing it. You feel much better watching them than doing it. Um, so far, we've raised $137.28 for mutual aid, which is wonderful. Thank you all who have donated so far. Um, and yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, Jared's information is in the chat. Next month, I'm not sure what we're going to do for our live stream, but I think it might be something around AAPI month. We have a couple, I know some practitioners out in the mental health field as well as the medical field, and maybe we can have a conversation about the intersections of our work. But again, thank you so much for being with us, Jared, and we hope to see you again after you get your PhD and hear about the work that you're doing.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Have a great, wonderful rest of your Saturday for everybody. Bye.